Recent studies have shown that the impact of climate change on weather patterns is seriously threatening global food security. The resultant effect is that certain foods have become extinct as climate change takes its toll on social and economic development in various countries. In order to minimize the losses of food varieties that communities are faced with, the concept of preserving seeds was initiated, triggering the establishment of national, regional, and global seed banks. On News in Depth today, we look at the role of gene banks in enhancing food security. Welcoming you to this week's program. My name is Pennipher Nyirenda. Do stay tuned. It shines like a hidden gem in the middle of ice, almost in the middle of nowhere. Its name, purpose, and relevance to mankind's existence is barely known to many. This is the Global Seed Vault. The vault or storage facility is carved 100 meters into one of the mountains between Norway and the North Pole, offering a natural cold storage for the material that is deposited here. The design alone is meant to make the storage facility and its contents literally last forever.
Some journalists call this the Noah's Ark of plant diversity, and personally I think that's quite a good name. We call it the world's most important room. So let's go in.
Hundreds of thousands of duplicate samples of seed from different parts of the world are in this special storage facility.
It's so important to have a backup of all these seeds so that you are sure that you can also grow the food we need for the next generations to come.
Currently, 968,000 samples of seeds from around the world have found space in the vault, whose capacity can contain in excess of 2 billion seeds. The material is carefully labeled, showing the country of origin and the seed type on the boxes used for storage. Unique seeds from Africa and Asia have made it into the vault with staple foods like rice, wheat, and sorghum. European and South American varieties of eggplant, lettuce, barley, and potato are among other crops that have been preserved for life. Some of the seed samples have been here for thousands of years.
What you see in here is 13,000 years of agricultural history. The genes you find in here existed in the natural flora in the Middle East 10,000–15,000 years ago. And then farmers started to use these plants and they improved the plants into the crops that we have today. There is in the seed vault about 70,000 different varieties of barley.
The Global Seed Vault does not work in isolation. Individual countries are tasked to provide supplies that meet the preservation standards. Well over 1,700 gene banks from different parts of the world hoard collections of seeds for food crops that need to be preserved.
It's from about the 1880s in Rhineland, and you will see examples of rust disease infect the different leaves. So this is not good for the trees, but here's an example of diversity, because right next to it we have this Benet Rouge, which is a cider apple, I guess you would say, from France, also in the 1880s. And as you can see, there's really no rust on this one whatsoever. I can't find a single spot. So if something bad happens to this plant, well, maybe this one comes through. And that just gives you a little bit of insurance.
Zambia is among countries that supply seed stocks to the Global Seed Vault. Unlike the magnificence of the Global Seed Vault, in Zambia, basic refrigerators are used to stock thousands of local seed varieties from all parts of the country. So far, 6,400 varieties have been collected and stored by the Zambia Agriculture Research Institute ZARI, which manages the National Plant Genetic Resources Center, which is also known as a National Gene Bank, housed at the Mount Makulu Research Center.
The National Gene Bank was actually established with the support of the Sadc Gene Bank through the funding of the Nordic countries. We were established almost at the same time in 1990. We have a total of 6,400 different accessions collected from all over the country. We've actually, basically covered the whole country collecting all the different varieties for over 40 different crops.
The material that is kept here has to undergo a rigorous process in order to find space in one of these fridges for a timeless experience.
We do conduct collection missions, sometimes once or twice per year, funds permitting. And once these materials have been collected, we bring them here at the receiving bay. I'm sure that you have seen the receiving bay where you were. And there we process them. Of course, we'll determine the moisture content, we'll look at the debris because they are from the field. So we need to sort them out, clean them out. And so we weigh them. And once that is done, and then we do the process of packaging. We package them in and silver materials. I'm sure you've seen transparent silver materials to ensure that the light is reflected. The light does not get into the packets, so that their moisture content and their viability rather is not compromised. They don't have to start germinating.
Despite Zambia having one of the oldest gene banks in southern Africa, it does not have direct access to the global seed vault. Instead, the material is channeled through the regional gene bank, which is technically known as the Plant Genetic Resources Center. It was set up by the Southern African Development Community, Sadc, backed by Nordic countries.
SPGRC was established in 1989. We've been here for many years now. It's a 20-year project which was funded initially by Nordic donors. But what was the problem when the center was established? It was an issue of the much needed genetic variation that was threatened. I think nowadays people are always talking about climate change, and yes, climate change indeed was threatening variability or plant variety that is required for crop improvement and food and nutrition security.
A mark of Zambia's contribution to the establishment of the center is specially engraved at the main entrance with inscriptions showing that founding President Kenneth Kaunda laid the foundation stone. Proximity places Zambia at a prime position because the Sadc Plant Genetic Resources Center is right within the national boundaries, located in the Chalimbana area on the eastern outskirts of the capital city, Lusaka.
Here in Zambia, we work through ZARI, but under ZARI there's a unit that is called the Gene Bank, the National Gene Bank. That's our connection to ZARI. Yes. So I have indicated to you that Zambia has got a certain amount, about 6,000 accessions that they've collected. So that process of collection, the coordination is done through here.
Of the 6,400 seed materials collected by ZARI, 50% have been replicated here at the Sadc Plant Genetic Resources Center, SPGRC.
So it's a platform for facilitating the exchange of germplasm among member countries, even going beyond, the Sadc region, both at Africa region as well as international. They will create that link to link you up to where you can get germplasm that you may require, which is not within your country.
The concept of creating gene banks was sparked by the need to maintain food security around the world, hence forming a backup system that would supply seeds to farmers in the event of loss of crops due to many reasons.
Crop diversity was disappearing from the farmers' fields because climate change was bringing about new deadly diseases, pests and diseases that we didn't see even before. There was actually loss of adaptation. The crops that we had were no longer, actually are becoming unsuitable to the environment that we are now living. There is also the issue of change in preferences, where people are now moving away from the traditional crops. We are lucky that here in Zambia, we still have a lot of communities who still eat the traditional vegetables, the traditional cereals and all those crops. But in other parts of the region, we are finding that people are now moving away from the traditional crops of millets, sorghum, and other cereals that we've been using in the past. So that is a threat in itself, and it can actually cause food insecurity.
Drastic changes in climate and resurgence of pests and diseases has contributed to the loss of foods that are valued by locals.
Basically, we can say crop diversity was disappearing from the farmers' fields because climate change was bringing about new deadly diseases, pests and diseases that we didn't see even before. There was actually loss of adaptation. The crops that we had were no longer, actually are becoming unsuitable to the environment that we are now living. There is also the issue of change in preferences, where people are now moving away from the traditional crops.
According to the system, if farmers find that they have run out of a certain seed type, they can go to the National Genebank and request for the seed. If the National Genebank doesn't have that variety, the request is escalated to the Regional Genebank. The last point of inquiry is the global seed vote. In the event that the seed cannot be traced, then it is officially extinct. The depletion of sorghum grown in Rufunsa area saw Zambia make use of the Sadc Plant Genetic Resource Center, and the variety was restored, much to the delight of the local farmers.
They used to grow a lot of sorghum some time back, and there are some varieties which actually, they record were actually good in terms of, for example, resisting, bait damage, and also even being more drought tolerant than those, the improved ones they have. So which we searched through the Genebank, and were able to allocate those materials which were collected in those areas, when we picked them some time back. And we were able to take those materials and grow them. And then farmers were able to see them grow in their field. And they were quite happy. They appreciated, the reintroduction of those materials.
Several other countries have sought replenishment of seed stocks that have depleted, and the Sadc Plant Genetic Resources Center has a record of these varieties.
In Malawi, there are some, that line there which was actually collected a long time ago, accession number 967, which was used to develop varieties Pirira 1 and Pirira 2, and these varieties are actually on the market. They are being used by farmers.
Considering that the seeds that are stored in the gene banks have to last a lifetime, their ability to give good yields at any given point is a matter of serious interest. It is the more reason why they are subjected to regular viability tests at provided intervals.
Right here where we're standing, that's where we receive the samples from the member states. And then what we do is register them. Then we also do viability testing. We mentioned that when we receive samples, we have to dry them. We have to test for moisture content. There's an analyzer there. So we test the moisture content. If it's above 7%, then we take it to the dryer so that it can dry further. When it reaches 7 or below, then we do a viability test. We want to know if this material, when we keep it in the bank, it will still be viable for future use.
In the event that seeds do not meet the required viability profile, they are sent back to the fields for improvement.
We keep base collection, we don't keep active collection. Active collection is what the breeders, the National Genebank at Nakuru is keeping, which is going to last for 10 years. But for us, we are looking at a longer term, and this is a base collection that we have to make sure. Now, how we save this? I said the viability test must be above 85% for the seed to qualify to go into our base collection. The moisture content must be between 7 and 6. I mean, 2 and 3. Must be below that. And this is for orthodox seeds. Seeds that can stand moisture, loss.
The seed varieties that are kept in the gene banks can last for as long as 100 years. For that to happen, the seeds have to meet certain conditions: cold storage and minimum moisture content.
Low temperatures are very important, for keeping materials viable for a long period of time. Because the science behind there is that when you dry, you reduce the moisture content of the seed, and you keep them under low temperature. You're basically, reducing the metabolism, but it still remains alive. So that when you take it out there and you give them, conditions that are optimal for its germination, they will germinate. But in the deep freezer, They remain, alive, but breathing very slowly so that they don't exhaust maybe the food which is in the seed. Because it's basically exhausting the food which is in the seed that makes it, die. Or maybe if it's subjected to, insect damage and so forth, then the seed will die. So we keep the seed alive here.
In Zambia, the seeds are kept at -20 degrees temperature and they're carefully stored in imported aluminium material.
We conserve them at -20 degrees Celsius, at least for this particular gene bank. And at that temperature, they can stay for over 50 years.
At the Sadc Resource Center, the material is stored at -18 degrees.
So it has to be -18 all the time.
The Global Seed Bank's location gives it a natural advantage because the area is already cold.
We have the permafrost here, -5. In there, it's -18. Svalbard is a safe place. It's the permafrost here, so it's frozen even if the artificial cooling fails. And Svalbard is quite far away from conflicts. Here we have boxes from Russia, and here we have boxes from Ukraine. And even if there are enemies abroad, outside, in this seed vault, they cooperate.
To reach the recommended moisture content, a special drying mechanism using high-tech equipment is used.
It is a slow drying, and there is equipment which is actually, designed for that purpose, called the dehumidifier dryer. It's a technology which actually dries the seed slowly, maybe over a period of something like 4 weeks, until the moisture content is maybe below 5%, and that's quite dry. Once the seed is dry to that level, then it has to be, put in packaged. In this case, we put them in aluminum foils. We seal those foils so that, there is no air inside. There is no moisture inside, and there's no air inside, and it doesn't allow moisture to get in after we seal.
The use of the seed stocks kept at gene banks is of interest to people engaged in research and development. Among these are breeders who can also use the material as a good base for developing improved varieties.
Azari has gone into an arrangement, some kind of an agreement with a number of seed companies that are developing, improving some of our materials, even multiplying some of the same materials.
When those institutions want the material to develop the variety, want a variety, we say, come and look at what we have. Can't you play around with this one? So that you come with that variety that you want.
Without this material, plant breeders, agriculture will never manage to feed the growing population. This is the raw material that we need for the future, that breeders need to make new varieties, to increase the world's food production. The work gene banks do every day, conserving their seeds, preparing the genes for future food supplies, is a very, very crucial and important work.
In order to keep track of supplies, an inventory is an important aspect. The Sadc Plant Genetic Resources Center is also responsible for managing the regional database of all the materials stored in the national gene banks, which it feeds into the global system.
The Sadc Gene Bank also maintains a central documentation and information database, which all the member countries actually use. And the information about the materials which in each country is maintained at the Sadc Gene Bank, and that provides a basis for exchange of information. You can know what material is maintained, what kind of materials is found in Malawi, in Tanzania, in all the Sadc member countries through that database which the Sadc Gene Bank maintains. And the Sadc Gene Bank also provides technical support, to the national gene banks.
There are perceptions that the work of gene banks may be linked to the generation of genetically modified organisms, but experts at the Sadc Plant Genetic Resources Center refute such fears.
Any genetic drifts, all those things which can work against the change the original composition of the seed we have, we need to make sure that they do not take advantage of the regeneration environment that we will be exposing the seed to at that point in time. So it's quite a demanding exercise.
In Zambia, the operation of the gene bank is grouped by a myriad of challenges, among them inconsistent power supply and limited financial resources.
One of the major challenges we have is, when there is power interruptions, and maybe breakdown of those deep freezers. So we need to have a system of taking care of that, and we've a standby generator which runs with diesel. So we need to have operational funds to be able to have diesel whenever it's required, and also funds to ensure that deep freezers that break down are either replaced or repaired without a big lag in terms. We shouldn't have material in the deep freezer without the freezers functioning for long periods of time.
Southern African Development Community Sadc supports Zambia in running the National Gene Bank with staff training and other capacity building initiatives. With the advent of climate change, resulting in harsh conditions that inhibit agricultural productivity, the relevance of seed banks has become more significant.
We're headed for climate, certainly in Africa and other areas, that have never before existed in the whole history of agriculture. The crops are on the front lines. They're the first thing that's really going to experience climate change, and they're not adapted to conditions they've never seen before. Our domesticated crops are totally dependent on us. Their survival depends on us.
Like the regional gene bank, Zambia is aware that climate change may limit the ability to store certain food varieties because the crops are struggling to grow in the extreme climatic conditions.
Climate change, first of all, because there's still some materials there, maybe pockets of what we call gaps, that where we have not collected from, where we still plan to go and collect, when resources become available. But we appreciate the fact that with climate change, the loss of some of those materials could actually be, those materials could be at more risk of loss. When you talk about, the instances of drought, which are becoming more frequent, and also, changes in temperatures and the other weather patterns are also bringing in some new pests and diseases, which can actually, destroy or lead to loss of some of those crops that are with farmers' foods.
To appreciate the significance and relevance of gene banks, there is a call for increased awareness, especially among farmers, in order for them to know how best they can use the facility that is meant to preserve mankind's food security.
There has to be some kind of continuous programs to support farmers enhance their farming systems, especially considering the advent of climate change. Farmers need to enhance their resilience, so we need to be working closely with them to try and get the materials back to them.
The concept of gene banks works like insurance. In the event of a calamity, the facility can help restore mankind's food supply chain. The Global Seed Vault offers options for future generations to overcome the challenges of climate change and population growth by securing seed materials that represent the world's crop diversity for centuries. Zambia is assured that its seed stocks are well secured in not only the regional gene bank but the global one as well. The need to invest in such facilities remains an ideal option in safeguarding the future. Well, that's all we had for you on this week's program, where we're looking at the role of gene banks in enhancing food security. Well, we have another insightful documentary next week at the very same time. From me, Pennipher Sikainda-Nyirenda, and the entire production crew, we say goodbye and God bless you.